Got it. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to the Bite Size Business webinar series brought to you by Tallo.com. Tallo is a digital connection platform that empowers employers, colleges, workforce development, and organizations with a very dynamic workforce and recruitment solution. You can learn how your business or organization can connect with nearly 2 million diverse early talent users on Tallo by going to tallo.com/request. And today I have a very, very special guest, and I'm really excited about this. Been looking forward to this for several weeks now. Today's special guest is a 25-year career serving as a chief marketing officer and executive vice president, and currently Franklin Covey's senior advisor on thought leadership. He hosts Franklin Covey's sponsored On Leadership with Scott Miller, the world's largest weekly leadership podcast, which features interviews with the world's top executives. He's a Wall Street Journal bestseller. He's a co-founding partner of Great Miller, a speaking literary talent agency representing some of the world's foremost leaders and authors and thinkers. He recently released, and the reason we're here today, The Ultimate Guide to Great Mentorship, which I have right here and is amazing, and is launching his 7th book in February, which I can't wait to get my hands on for students around the country. And that's titled Career on Course, 10 Strategies to Take Your Career from Accidental to Deliberate. So I'd like to welcome Scott Jeffrey Miller. Welcome, Scott.
Hey, Mike, how are you?
Life is amazing. How are you?
I'm honored to be here. Thanks for your patience this morning. Looking forward to a great conversation. I'm in Salt Lake City, where it's a nice, beautiful fall mid-morning today.
Oh, no problem at all. We're learning how to live in Zoom and how to live in these webinars, and I just appreciate you carving some time out. And holy wow, you have been busy. It sounds like everybody wants some of your time, so we're excited. But before we really dive into the ultimate guide here, and it was the reason why we're here today, can you fill us in, just fill the group, the attendees in on what the past few months have been like since launching this program? It's had to have been crazy.
Well, it's been an honor. As you mentioned, I've been privileged to have authored and published now 7 books. Most of them all are in the leadership development, mentorship, career space. Spent 3 decades with the Franklin Covey Company, one of the most trusted names in the leadership world. And so as a result of having been mentored by a lot of people in my career and having mentored a few as well, I decided to write this very practical guide. Honored to be partnered with Tallo in a variety of measures, including today's webcast. So been on this circuit, a couple hundred podcasts and speeches and keynotes around the nation, helping organizations that have mentorship initiatives or are looking to launch one, speaking about how to make sure your mentors are well prepared to do just that with their mentees. I think it's a great career retention strategy. It's a great engagement strategy. And because the book is so practical, I think that's why it's had so much traction in the market.
Yeah, and it's traction's an understatement. It's on the Amazon bestseller list, and we're gonna really dive into it and kind of understand like who's mentoring and who's being mentored. But before we do that, who's using the ultimate guide and who's doing the mentoring, and essentially like what's all the hype?
Yeah, I think that most organizations now, whether you're a state agency or a federal agency, whether you're working for a county or a not-for-profit, a for-profit Fortune 5000, maybe you're an Inc. 5000, regardless of the size and mission of your company, I don't know of an organization that doesn't have some mentoring initiative in place or is thinking of designing one, mainly because the new demographic of the workforce wants to see what is their career development. How long can I stay in this organization? How quickly should I leave because the resources aren't there to develop my career? So I have not spoken with someone responsible for the development of people's careers in the company that doesn't have some interest in a mentorship program. And so who's using this is people that are bringing mentors and mentees together, and they're realizing, oh, just because you are a leader does not mean you're qualified to be a mentor. A lot of the competencies that make you a great mentor, Mike, don't necessarily make you a great mentee, or sorry, mentor. Leadership and mentor aren't always the same thing. So HarperCollins asked me to write this book. I identified 13 roles that mentors play. Sometimes they underplay them, sometimes they overplay them. And I've given a lot of insights as to when should this role be employed when you're mentoring someone. A lot of scripts, say this, don't say that, do this, don't do that. And I think that's why so many companies are choosing to give the book and the certification to their mentors to help better train them so that their mentees have a person in the company they can go to ask questions and really explore what their career growth might be inside the company versus getting burnt out or bored or feeling unappreciated and leaving going elsewhere.
Those are some great points. And it made me think of immediately, like, just because you're a great athlete, you might not be a great coach, or just because you're a great musician, a great drummer, you might not be a great band leader. And I love the way you framed that. So let's dive right into some of this in the actual program. Can you talk to me about the premise of the program? I'm holding the book just because but it is actually a platform. It is actually an immersive, almost a certification series. And I just, not to jump off the track, but a lot of your points you make are not just for mentors and mentees. Like, a lot of it is guidance for life, which I found very cool. But so can you tell us a little bit about the premise of it and how does it work?
In many ways, the book is also a leadership book. It's a parenting book. It's a book about how to be a great mentor. When I wrote the book and people started to review it and edit it, they said, gosh, Scott, there's so many great dialogues in here. Here's 8 ways to have this conversation, or 6 ways to think about this mentee circumstance. They said, I think that's the most valuable part. So what I did was I created 13, if you will, certification videos. These are about 5 minutes a piece. They're very short for busy professionals, busy leaders that perhaps have been invited to be a mentor in the organization. And what I have found, Mike, is that when most people like you and I that are busy leaders were invited to be mentors, and we realize, oh, tomorrow morning is my first mentor session, they get on the internet and start Googling great mentor questions or how to be a great mentor. I apologize for my dog in the background. He's in jail. He's in jail up here. Welcome to life after the pandemic, right? So I taped 13 5-minute certification videos. When you're in the role of the boundary setter or the revealer or the activator, here are ways to think about this. And then I created 13 little quick start videos on, okay, so now that you understand what the role of boundary setter is, here's the first thing you should consider doing in this role. So the certification program is all in about 90 minutes. It reviews the outcome of that particular role. What's the upside when you perform it well? What's the downside when you abandon it? What are the key skills? And then here are 2 videos, one 5-minute overview video and one 2-minute quick start video. And the certification course really allows you to be much better equipped, much more equipped to take the content of the book, the skills you may have learned as a leader or a manager, and bring that full force to your mentee. Only 90 minutes. I designed it for fast-paced, in-demand leaders that have been volunteered, or in some cases voluntold, to become a mentor in the organization.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's what's key. Because as a school leader and a school district leader, adding one more thing in terms of a training is, is it a week? Is it a month? Or is it like, what's turnkey? So I really like the fact that you could dig in and you cut away all the fluff and trim the fat, and you got, like, this is how to be a great mentor. And it really guides the mentor in the process. And we only have time, I'd love to give everyone all 13, and we can talk about how to grab these and access these through Tallo. Because we're partnering with Scott and offering this, but we only have time to dive into a few. So how about just starting at the beginning, like rule number 1? You talk about self-awareness as a key characteristic of this role, and Can you talk a little bit more about self-awareness? And this is something I talk to my kids a lot too, my own children. So this is a very important one for everyone, I believe.
Sure. A little bit of context, right? So there are 13 roles in this book and in the certification. Very quickly, role number 1 is the revealer. Role number 13 is the closer, kind of the bookends. All the other 11 roles in the middle can kind of be switched up. I created a hierarchy of sorts, but you really could start anywhere, go everywhere. But the first role, the role of the revealer, is first for a reason, because it reminds mentors, whether you're a high school principal or you're a district superintendent or whatever role you're in life, your job really is to uncover your mentees' goals so that they can discover them. I kind of write in the book that in this role, you're kind of the paleontologist, you're the archaeologist, you're kind of moving in, not with jackhammers and pitchforks, but with brushes and like dentist picks, right? Very carefully uncovering, brushing away the dust of what it is the mentee wants to accomplish. Because a lot of mentees may not know. I may want to be a chiropractor or a commercial airline pilot. I might want to be a patent attorney or a district superintendent or something. You just kind of never know. So this role of the revealer starts with you recognizing your job is to help to articulate what it is your mentee wants to accomplish, their goal, but maybe your wisdom, your journey, helping them really understand what it takes to accomplish that. But it's important that you understand that you bring with this a set of personality traits that could help or discourage a mentee. You need to be self-aware to know what's it like to be on the other end of a meeting with you, a conversation with you, a Zoom call with you. It really requires self-awareness. What is your voice, your rate, your pitch, your tone, your energy, your hand gestures, your title, your experience? By the very nature of being a mentor, in most cases, Mike, you're going to be more senior, probably have a little more sophistication, more education. Not always, right? There's people that are younger than you mentoring you occasionally. Some people call that reverse mentorship. I call it mentorship. There's no such thing as reverse mentorship. But this requires, like you said, a heightened level of self-awareness. Mike, in my career of 30 years, I've had the honor of interviewing hundreds of people for jobs. I've had the privilege of hiring about 60 people, and I've had the duty, the burden of terminating 17 people. I've had to fire 17 people in my career. And every one of them was tough. But I can tell you this, not one of those 17 people that I terminated did I do so because they lacked the technical skills to do their job. They had the degree, they had the certification, they had the knowledge. Every one of those 17 terminations was because that employee lacked the self-awareness to know what it was like to lead them, to be led by them, to work on a team with them, to be on a Zoom call or a trade show booth or work on a project. They had no idea what it was like to work with them. They usually were very low, had low self-awareness. And it kind of resulted from a lack of them being comfortable receiving feedback, of course, correcting. And so this first role, the revealer, has two parts. As a mentor, your job is to help to articulate with your mentee what it is they're trying to accomplish. What are they trying to get done? They want to take the LSAT. They want to go to graduate school. They want to become a vice president. They want to pivot out from healthcare into technology. They want to move to the London office, whatever it is. And then if you want to be a valued mentor, the best way to accomplish that is to understand what is your style and how can you best calibrate it to bring out that passion, to talk about the fears, the joys, the traumas that your mentee may have that are inhibiting them from accomplishing that. This is the first role for a reason. And I mentioned in the book and in the certification course, the worst mistake a mentor can make is to say, hey, Mike, if I were you, here's what I would do. You can never say that because I'm not Mike. I don't have Mike's good looks. I don't have his thick hair. I don't have his personality. I don't have all that kind of stuff. And so you can never say, Mike, if I were you, I would do this. What you could say is, Mike, when I was faced with a similar set of circumstances and some similar struggles, here's the questions that I worked through that helped me come up with my answer. Let's see if any of those are relevant for you in your circumstance. It's just a slight change where you're not foisting your fears, your journey, or you trying to live vicariously through your mentee that we all tend to do as parents. I don't know about you. I
Yeah.
totally live through my children. I'm getting a second chance, which is a horrible parenting strategy. Stay far from it as a mentor.
That's it's really interesting because when you talk about being able to receive information or criticism, you almost have to, before you even give criticism in this role, you have to address that, like, I'm going to be giving you all sorts of feedback, and the way you frame it, as you mentioned, is probably going to be really important. Instead of saying, don't do this, do this. Well, that's not mentoring, right? It's like you're giving, I could Google that. I want to know your Scott Jeffrey Miller's experiences where you struggled and then how you got through that. So I think being aware of what your situations were,
Yes.
and then being able to share them with the person you're trying to mentor is key.
Yeah. And especially making sure that it's relevant, because I might share an experience in my career that has nothing to do with the mentee's goal or with their strengths or their fears. And so whatever it is you're sharing as a mentor, you have to ask yourself, why am I sharing this? Is this helping my mentee? Are they able to build a bridge to kind of walk across metaphorically their journey into my journey? This is not your confession session. This is not your chance to make up for your mistakes. Is to ask yourself, has my mentee identified and articulated a goal? What is it they're trying to do? And is everything I'm saying and how I am saying it helping them build their confidence and their skill set and their courage to make it happen in their life? Because a lot of what you could say is unrelatable, or maybe you say it in a vice presidential way that has all kinds of multi-syllabic words or a huge vocabulary. Or when I was running the European operation, what? I mean, be very thoughtful about what it is you're saying so that you're moving into your mentee's world, because it is difficult for them to move into yours.
What I hear you saying is that you're establishing a foundation in this role to build the continued relationship and all of the other roles on. You're
Right.
really setting it here.
That's right. By the very nature of being the mentor, you already have a heightened sense of stature. You probably, like I said, you are fairly more intimidating than you think you are. So your job is to, honest to God, level the playing field, right? Talk more simply, be more aware. I mean, look at me, for example. I'm a very energetic person. I have a lot of energy. I have a strong, sometimes even very assertive personality style. I can come across as very domineering and very intimidating to some people who might not have the 50 years of life experience, 55 that I have, lots of mistakes, a few successes. And so it's mindful for me to calibrate that energy and make sure I'm setting the conditions that are safe for my mentee to be vulnerable. Because the worst thing you want to happen is for your mentee to try to become you, try to match your energy, and then they're just faking it. You want to move into their world until they can move into yours.
It's very interesting, and this might be TMI for our webinar, but when we first met, I immediately was drawn to your style because you seem very aware of your strengths and your personality, and it always seemed like you deliberately put space in there for us who might be intimidated by an author or somebody, an expert, to speak. And I always appreciated that, and I think that was like, oh, this more people have to hear about this, because yourself, it's like you are applying your lessons every day, whether it's a Zoom call or a quick phone call. We have 5 minutes, but you always carved out time to hear, which made me feel comfortable and allowed for us to build a relationship. Which brings me to when you're kind of leveling the playing field, as you mentioned, and you're kind of like, hey, I might be the president of this company, or I might be a very famous person, or I might be somebody with power in a situation. You're opening some doors and opening some ability for relationship, but then you have to set boundaries, right, around that, because there's a lot that comes along with that. And I really connected with this role about setting clear boundaries, which is role number 2. And this is the one where I talked about setting life lessons or talking to your high school or your college student about setting boundaries, advocating for yourself, being vulnerable, but not sharing too much information. Like this is one that I'd like you to focus in on. And it's really great for mentoring, but man, this is a life lesson that shoots straight through every situation.
Well, this is one of the roles that probably is the most difficult for mentors to get their hands around, because it does require you to move outside of your comfort zone and sometimes discuss the undiscussables, right? This idea of good fences makes good neighbors is the metaphor here. This is the mentor's job. If you agree with the premise that the majority of the time, not all the time, but the majority of the time, the mentee is going to be of more junior stature, a little less sophisticated, probably has less education, not always, but generally, they're not going to know what the boundaries are, the relationship. What's the protocol of a mentoring situation? So this is why the mentor needs to take charge and set boundaries. Usually early on, not in the first 5 minutes, but it might go something like this. Let me role play with Mike. Let's assume for a minute that I was the mentor and Mike was the mentee. In real life, it might be the other way around, given Mike's enormous experience. So. But let's just assume for a moment. I might say, hey, Mike, I'm so looking forward to our next 12 mentor sessions. We're going to meet every other Friday for 30 minutes. We're going to do it on Zoom. If we find ourselves in the same city, maybe we'll do, a couple at a coffee shop, whatever is appropriate. But Mike, we've spent the last 30 minutes kind of getting to know each other. You've talked a little bit about what your goals are. I do think it's important to have this conversation for us both to set some boundaries. Now, Mike, I'm going to have a bit of an uncomfortable conversation with you for 3 minutes. It's going to be awkward. Here's the good news. In 4 minutes, it'll be less awkward. But I think it's important that I, as the mentor, set some boundaries so that neither of us found ourselves in an uncomfortable situation, because mismatched expectations often are the result of conflict. Mike, I think it's important that you recognize that as your mentor, I am not comfortable being your sponsor, your ally, your champion, or your supporter. Those are other roles that your leaders have. As your mentor, my job is to help bring all the mistakes and the learnings that I've made in my journey to bear to help you accomplish what you want to accomplish. I would hate for you to be disappointed to ask me for a reference or to be your ally or supporter. That's not my role as mentor. So please don't ask me or place me in that position. Secondly, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a mental health counselor. I'm a spouse and a leader and a husband and a brother and a son. So to the extent I can help you with those lessons, I'm happy to do that. But if you were to need any, like legitimate therapy, I'm not your guy. And we all could use that. So let's make sure we set a boundary around that. I'm not qualified to offer you mental health counseling at all, should you even need that. Thirdly, because I have a large network, I guard it very jealously. And so I'm going to set a very strict boundary around I'm not interested or willing to make connections in my network. I'm an author and I host a large podcast and I have access to a lot of people from industries, and I just do not make connections. So I'm just going to ask that you do not ask me or place either of us in the uncomfortable position where I would need to say no. And so that's kind of it. Anything else is fair game. Now, Mike, I'm going to guess you may have some boundaries that you'd like me to honor as well. Now, let me stop there. I obviously condensed that into 3 minutes. That might have been a little more genteel, a little more careful. And some of you might think, wow, that was harsh. Why would you assume they needed mental health counseling? Or you won't give someone a connection? Take a step back. I was just role playing. But let's be careful. If Mike today asked me to connect him with Matthew McConaughey, the answer is no. Or a U.S. senator, the answer is no. Now, the fact is, I actually know Mike. I probably would make a connection to someone, but I guard my network very carefully. I'm not going to make a connection to someone that I've earned trust with through a pattern of being trustworthy if I don't know that person. The fact of the matter is, as a mentor, when I'm setting boundaries, I tend to set them very high, uncomfortably high. And then I sit back and I watch what, quote, Mike is going to do. If Mike comes on time to 9 sessions, he's prepared, he makes and keeps commitments, he's showing self-awareness, he's showing maturity, I might change my role and say, Mike, in our first session, I mentioned that I don't make connections, and I generally don't. but I've seen in you a discipline and a maturity and a level of self-awareness that makes me want to change that. I happen to know an attorney in town that's looking for someone to do an internship, and I think you might be perfect. You get the point. So I set boundaries high, so I'm in control of how to reset them. You have to decide what language to use, when to do it, what your boundaries are. And by the way, you noticed I invited Mike to also set some boundaries as the mentee, because I don't know Mike's journey. I don't know his trauma. For all I know, his father took his life when he was 10. I should be aware of that because there might be some sensitive issues that I might, in a moment to be funny, say something that is a trigger to him. And I'd want to know that. That's a macabre example, but it does go both ways. I do think it's the mentor's job to articulate out what are your boundaries and then say them in a way that doesn't come across as offensive. Be self-aware, use good judgment, but set them up front, because if you don't set the boundaries, the mentee won't know when they're crossing the boundaries, and then it always becomes an awkward, uncomfortable conversation, much more awkward later than that was the one that I role played.
Well, as like putting myself in just in that scenario, like, okay, I'm the mentee. One, immediately I had a jump up in anxiety.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, my anxiety, I just felt it go down because like, oh, I know what Friday is going to look like. And I know immediately, and by the way, for any of our educators out there, this is very important to do in the classroom as well, because you give expectations of where the rails are. And I think that's very critical, because even though it might be uncomfortable for a second, we as humans, we're always looking for that, right? So what is the guidance? So there's no gray area.
A couple of points on that. The famous author Brene Brown, and most people know who Brene is, right? A psychologist with experts on shame and boundaries and leadership. She says, clear is kind. That's a good life mantra. Clear is kind. I was at a university recently where one of the board of trustees walked in to a keynote I was giving on the ultimate guide to great mentorship. And he shared how excited he was that he just left a speed round at the university commons where he was able to mentor like 7 students, 7 minutes apiece. And he came in and shared, oh, I made this connection and that connection, and I referred them to this person, and I didn't want to rain on his parade. And I let him speak, and I said, I'm delighted that was very validating to you. In the spirit of just challenging you, I have to tell you, I would never do that, because my reputation is my most valuable asset. And I have carefully cultivated this network of people that I, by the way, do very generously pollinate throughout my network. But I would never make a connection in 7 minutes to someone I'd never met, because I have no idea if they're going to show up, if they're going to be respectful, if they get the skills. Because what happens when that student or that employee doesn't deliver on the reputation, it harms my network. It harms my credibility. So although I am an extraordinarily abundant connector, I do so with extreme judiciousness and caution. Once I know that we share values, character, and competence, then I make the connections, not beforehand.
Well, your statement, there's a couple of questions in the chat, and I think that your statement you just made can answer some of those, because what immediately comes to my mind is formal mentoring, which is what we're talking about here, versus informal mentoring or even coaching or networking. Can you address, and this is one of the questions, what's the difference between those coaching and mentoring and the formal side versus the informal? Let me help you out.
They're kind of nuanced. I mean, how I describe it, usually coaches, this is a career for them, right? They've either earned some designation, they have a pedagogy, they've gone to a university, they've been certified, they have a very clear process, and they're being compensated, right? That's a totally legitimate way to earn a living. I don't know anybody that hasn't made it to the C-suite, that hasn't become an author, an athlete, a record holder, a CEO, a superintendent, a university president, that hasn't had a paid coach. It's a commonality amongst highly successful people. Mentors are usually doing this out of the goodness of their heart. It's not a career for them. They have a full-time job typically somewhere, and they've been asked to take their life experience and pour it into a mentee. There's no money exchange. There is value exchange, because I always learn a ton from my mentee about myself and my competencies and where I'm irrelevant. But I think the big difference there is mentoring is always pro bono. I don't know if someone is getting paid for this. Don't know why you would. That's a coach, and you've been highly trained. Mentorship is usually a plus, right? You're doing this and you've been asked to do that, but they generally follow similar missions, usually have a similar process. But the difference is most coaches have been certified in a process, and there was no process in mentorship until my book and my certification came along. And I think that's the best way for mentors to take their skills to the next level, is to partner with Tallo and get into that 90-minute certification. And by the way, it could have been 9 hours. Yes. I thought that was overkill. I didn't think most mentors needed more than about 90 minutes to kind of, soften this and soften that and set this. And Tallo's a great partner to work with their clients to do just that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And really what we're about is connecting the user, if you will, to opportunities and experiences. So this is an opportunity. There's another question in here that I think might segue us a little bit, but on the other side, being the mentee, if you were to switch roles, how might you ask a question or ask about a boundary? So if I was the mentor, you were the mentee,
Yes.
how would you ask a boundary? Because somebody's asking me is like, how do I ask questions to my mentor?
Yes.
Roles a little bit.
So I think in the very beginning of your mentor relationship, let's just say it's 9 months and you're going to meet every third Friday. I'm making this up. Every situation and circumstance is different. I do think it's the mentor's job to set the conditions, set the environment. In business and education, we hear so much right now about engagement. Everybody is measuring engagement. Everybody's, fixated with engagement. Are employees engaged? Well, we oftentimes hear that leaders create engagement, but it's not true. Leaders do not create engagement. What leaders and mentors do is you create the conditions so other people can choose their own level engagement, high or low. You can force someone into low engagement. I don't think you can force someone into high engagement. So what mentors need to do up front is your job is to set the conditions. Hey, Mike, we're going to have a great conversation today and the next 9 weeks. I'm going to learn from you. You're going to learn from me. There's going to be situations that come up that neither of us might be comfortable with, but I think it's important that you and I trust each other. We're going to say some things that we regret. We're going to want to, ask some clarifying questions. Let's agree to pre-forgive each other. Let's agree that both of our intents is to help each other. My intent is to help you achieve your goal. Your intent is to get there. No doubt I'm going to learn some things from you along the way for sure. But let's just set the rule that other than the boundaries that we set, let's feel comfortable asking each other questions and be mindful of what, is good protocol in any friendship or relationship. But let's just also set the conditions that if we're not comfortable going there, let's just say, Mike, I'm not comfortable offering that support, and we move on. We're not going to overanalyze it. We're not going to feel embarrassed by it. Is that we're just going to move forward. Is, what? I have a boundary around that, or I'm not comfortable doing that, or let me think on that and I'll come back to you next session. I think the mentee should be empowered to ask any question they want unless the mentor has set a boundary beyond that. Here's a good example. Mike might say, Scott, I Googled you, and I realized that in a previous podcast, you said that the Walt Disney Company fired you. Can you tell me about that? And I might say, Mike, actually, I did fire. Well, I was fired. I'm not sure that story is relevant to our journey, so I'm going to choose to move past that. Or I might say, as a matter of fact, Mike, Walt Disney did fire me after 4 years. It was one of the best days of my life, the day after. And I'm happy to share it in the context of how it can help you with issues you're facing. So I think the mentor has to recognize your job is to set the conditions. Those conditions may evolve, they may devolve, and you have to not take offense. You have to declare your intent. Hey, Mike, my intent as the mentor is to help you accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. And so I'm going to be mindful that everything we talk about needs to be in the context of that. And let's not spend time on things that aren't as well, because the mentor is not the mentor's friend. You could have a friendship and not be friends. As the mentor, your job is to have a beginning and an end. And your job is to help get that mentee to wherever the end is that you have articulated. What does success look like? Have you defined success? And that relationship builds toward that end. And by the way, I think it's important for mentors to set boundaries at the end. Hey, Mike, today is our last mentor session. It's been an honor. Let's talk about all the things we've laughed about, cried about. We had a couple of kerfluffles. Welcome to life. And Mike, I am so excited to see you flourish in life. Today is the end of this relationship, and I'm going to move on now and mentor someone else. No doubt you may have other mentors in your life. I'll be looking forward to viewing you from afar. I'll look forward to seeing your success on LinkedIn, and I've so enjoyed this. Now, what I've done there is I've set a boundary. Mike, we're done. It's been great. I'm not coming to your kegger. I'm not coming to your high school graduation. I'm not coming to your wedding, or maybe I am. Again, I'm being a little bit, stern on this, but I do think it's important to set boundaries at the end. We've closed it out, and I look forward to watching your success on LinkedIn. And now Mike's pretty clear that I'm not coming to the frat party next week. We're mentor and mentee, not keggers. You get the point.
Oh yeah. And what I'm hearing you saying, in one, is you're being deliberate through the whole conversation. Two, the more you speak in this way, the less awkward it becomes, because it just becomes part of our norm. And three, what I'm finding is you're really showing me how to be a mentor and how I should be a mentor someday to my mentee, because my mentor established this. It went very well. That's how I'm going to coach my next or mentor my next person. I love that.
And the circumstance might be different. It might be that Mike has blown it out of the water in these last 9 sessions, and I've seen huge growth in him. And I might say, Mike, let's stay in touch, right? I have a very busy schedule. If you know, the best way to get to me is through email. I would prefer you not text or call, because my days are so focused on my businesses and my children, on my priority. But if I can help you in the coming years, feel free to reach out with great discretion. You just have to know the circumstance. But I do think 9 times out of 10, it continues to be the mentor setting the conditions for what does our relationship look like going forward.
I appreciate that in the way you clarified some of those challenging conversations, but I think they're great nuggets of just life advice. We only have really time for one more, and I just pulled up the 13 slides, and I'm looking through a bunch here of the ones that I went through, and one that really spoke to me though, and I think as I'm looking at the list that really I think we should to close out and talk about is the validator. And it spoke to me as a school principal, my former life as a school principal, and what I found is relationships, communications were key, whether it was for student progress or teacher innovation. Like, it was all built on relationship. And that appears, if I'm getting it right, to be central to the validator role, which is number 6.
Yeah.
Can you talk about why validator is so important, and maybe talk about how you might do that and demonstrate a little bit of that?
I'm delighted you picked that one. Real quickly, here are the 13 roles in order: the revealer, the boundary setter, the absorber, the questioner, the challenger, the validator, we'll come back to that, the navigator, the visionary, the flagger, the distiller, the activator, the connector, and the closer. This one you mentioned, the validator. I think this one has the most consequence. I think the boundary setter is the most difficult. I think number 8, the visionary, is the most counterintuitive. I think the validator has the most consequence. Let me share a story with you. Mike, you may or may not be aware of this, but I am a lifelong stutterer. I have a fairly debilitating speech impediment. I've been a stutterer my entire life. I've had speech therapy and speech pathology for 3 decades. I have 2 speech coaches. I've had braces 3 times, Invisalign twice, headgear. To this day, I still have a speech coach. And there are about 36 words that I cannot say in public. In the winter time, in the cold, it quadruples to about 150 words. I have a stutter. I've worked very hard to overcome this. And as you know, kind of like liars have to have great memories, stutterers have to have great vocabularies. Now, there's all different types of stuttering, right? Some of it's neurological, some of it's sociological, some of it's, physiological. But you'll find that a lot of stutterers tend to be big readers because we have to have big vocabularies. Because when a word is coming up 2 or 3 sentences out that I know I cannot say in public, I metaphorically have to take my car off the highway over into a rest stop, pick up a word that might be the replacement word for the one coming up, and get back on. So stutterers have to have large vocabularies. I know what words are coming up in 2 or 3 sentences, and I know I can't say them. So I have to have a bet, almost like a chest of drawers, right? I pull open a chest and pick out a word. Anyway, rewind about 40 years ago. I was living in Central Florida. I'm from Orlando, the tourist capital of the world. I was working at a small restaurant, a bakery. Now, mind you, I'd been hired in high school to mop the floors in the back, wash the pans. I graduated up to be the bus boy. I eventually got to be the delivery boy in college. And now I am a freshman in college, and I've now graduated up to work the front counter. I have to have conversations with actual people. A Middle Eastern tourist came in, and she asked me for directions. I believe it was to like a local hair salon. Now, mind you, this is 40 years ago, 38 years ago. She buys a croissant and a cup of coffee, and I give her directions to this beauty salon that is about a mile away. Travel down here 7 blocks, turn right there, turn left, whatever it was. And I'm a stutterer. It is a massive level of courage it took to move from washing the dishes to manning the front counter. She turns to me as she walks out and she says, quote, "You are a great communicator. You have a phenomenal command of your language. This will take you far in life." And she walks out the door.
Wow.
This is 38 years ago. Someone said to me in a moment of extraordinary validation, "You have a great command of your language. This will take you far in life." Mike, I was a stutterer. Now, I don't know as a consequence of that, whether that's why I went on to become an author and a host of the largest podcast in the world on leadership. I hosted an iHeartRadio. I speak for a living. My point is, this woman unknowingly became the most important validator in my life because she just chose to name what my superpower was. And so as the validator, when you're a mentor, you're not validating everything. You're very carefully choosing what is it you see in your mentee, and you rehearse it and you role play it and you take a time out. Mike, here's a role play. I want to stop for a moment. And I want to share with you what I think is something extraordinary that you possess. Mike, I don't want you to deflect it or to deny it. I just want you to listen. And then I go into and I use very specific words to describe what it is I see in you. I validate it in you. And then I say, Mike, it's also important to note that our strengths, when overplayed, can sometimes become our weaknesses. Let's also talk about how this superpower in you, if overplayed, could become a liability, right? My charisma, quite frankly, can be fatiguing on some people. So I have to know when to take a step back. Sometimes I physically get into someone's personal space, and I have to know when that is even repulsive to some people. I can repel people. I know that because I'm self-aware. You get the point. This role has arguably the biggest consequential impact. It can't happen every 5 minutes. It can't happen every call. You have to decide when you are going to employ the role of validator. Role play it. Choose your words very carefully, because I think your mentee, like me, will remember it 38 years later.
One, I just wanted to call out that you set a boundary on your statement. So you use, this is kind of meta, but you said when you were going to give somebody a validation, you set a boundary about that statement for them to work within. So they don't go, nah, that's not true. Like you set them up to know it was okay. So it was very interesting that you use that strategy, not just about the whole mentoring session, but about the statement you're about to make, which made them open for it. And I thought that was critical. I know there's some very famous stutterers that became and overcame their challenge.
The King of England, the President of the United States.
I was gonna say there's a movie, and it's very. I have to imagine and commend you on just the deliberateness it took for you to get over that and still commit to it, because you probably have to practice it, right? Just like a musician.
I do. There's lots of stutter words. It's hard for some of you to appreciate that because you're not seeing it come out today. I've built a lot of guardrails. I know what words trip me up. I know what emotions and circumstances build my slur. Because I speak very rapidly, it tends to exacerbate my stutter. So I've tried to learn how to over enunciate without becoming robotic. I'm still working on that. It's a lifelong struggle for me. But it was that woman who happened to be from Israel, by the way. I remember this because we talked briefly about her heritage. It has been the most consequential conversation of my life. And I think mentors have the ability to be the same validator. Parents, neighbors, caregivers, principals, superintendents, teachers, leaders. You have the ability to be the validator in someone's life. And I think you have to be very careful and judicious, because if you go across, oh, you're always on time, I like your background, your hair looks, that's not validation, that's puffery. You can say that, but if all you do is just offer puffery, no one knows whether it's consequential or not. That's why it's important not to over-validate someone. But if you've listened and learned to their circumstance, they might need validation that they showed up today. Maybe there's some trauma happening in their life. Again, I'm not a therapist, so I don't try to portray one, but I tend to use this one with the most discretion so that when I do employ it, like the seize part, and this person remembers it forever.
I really feel like we could take a whole session and just talk about that one, and but unfortunately we're getting towards the end here, and about 6 minutes left here. So I just want to there's a couple questions I have, and unfortunately I'm not going to get to all of them, but and maybe we can come back another time and talk about the other ones a different day. What do people usually get wrong about mentorship, Scott? Like, what in your experiences, what are folks missing?
Yeah, it's kind of what I opened with. Well, Mike, if I was you, here's what I would do. You may never say that. Do not try to live vicariously through your mentee. And no one admits to this, but we do it all the time. I completely live vicariously through my 3 sons that are 9, 11, and 13, buying them things I didn't have, giving them things that I think will set them up. And so I think we do that as leaders, and especially as mentors. Don't try to live your life through your mentee. Take a step back. What is Mike trying to accomplish? Okay, Mike's trying to decide whether he wants to go to college or become a plumber, whether he wants to be a chiropractor or he wants to become an orthopedic surgeon. These are very different journeys. Mike wants to open up a cupcake stand at his local farmer's market, or he's thinking about working in a bakery. These are, similar but different. So you're constantly thinking, what advice could I give to Mike that will help him clarify his journey? What mistakes can I share? What level of vulnerability, of transparency can I say to Mike? How does my style get in the way of Mike learning from me? Hey, Mike, let's talk about some of the 14 things you're going to need to do to be qualified to open up your cupcake stand at the local farmer's market. Mike, it might feel a little bit overwhelming, but let's talk about it. You're going to need a health certificate, right? You're going to probably need a professional bakery. You're going to need some packaging. You're going to need some cash and a runway. You're going to have a cash drawer. You're going to, signage. You're going to have whatever that is, without overwhelming you. Let's organize them in categories. I think what mentors do that gets in the way of their mentee is thinking through, how do I want to show up? How do I want my mentee to feel at the end of this phone call? Better, stronger, more confident, or less overwhelmed, intimidated? And the more you can exercise an unnatural level of patience and self-awareness, you're going to have a profound impact on your mentee feeling vulnerable, feeling comfortable. That's the big goal, is to allow your mentee to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And the mentor is responsible for setting those conditions.
Oh, I really love that. I think being able to allowing your mentee to struggle is being the problem solver, but
and not to feel like they're embarrassing themselves, because what you don't want to do is have your mentee try to match your vocabulary or try to impress you. That's failure going into it. I want you to say, hey, Mike, listen, I got 40 years on you, right? So I've learned a few things. There's no doubt there is great genius in you. I do not want you to ever have to choose your words really carefully or to try to, be someone you're not. I don't want you to try to become me or anybody else. I want you to be your best you. And so it's important that you feel comfortable being vulnerable and awkward and struggle with things. That's my job. My job is to help you find some clarity on what is your genius, what is your passion, what are your goals. So the more that I can set that environment for you, feel free to call me out. If I'm using words you don't understand, raise your hand and say, Scott, I don't know what that means. I don't know what a P&L is. I don't know what EBITDA is. I don't know what cost of goods is. I don't know what these terms are. And by the way, mentor, don't set the conditions to use phrases your mentee won't share. Maybe you say, Mike, every business owner needs to know how to read a P&L. In case you don't know, that's the profit and loss statement. All of your gross revenue, the revenue that comes in, less all of your expenses, and the profit you get to take home and put in the bank. If you'd like to spend some time talking about how to read a profit and loss statement, I'd be happy to share some time, right? That's the kind of mentorship mentees need. Don't patronize your mentor, but also don't assume they have your level of experience or your journey, because 9 times out of 10, they don't.
Wow. I think with our 1 minute left, I just want to take that minute to thank you so much for being here, Scott. And as a 25-year chief marketing officer, executive vice president, author, Wall Street Journal bestseller, co-founder of Gray Miller, and then obviously the ultimate guide to great membership. And then coming up, I can't wait in February. I just want to thank you for cutting some time out for us, and hopefully we get to speak to you again. If anybody out there is interested in getting connected here, you can actually reach out to us here at Tallo and get connected with us. We'd be very happy to connect you with this work and with these platforms, whether you're a Fortune 500 or a local mom and pop serving in your local community. There's great, honestly, if you're a parent just looking for some good skills,
thanks.
This is a way to do it. You can contact us, Tallo. I'm going to go ahead and put up here, I'm going to share on the screen, we have a QR code, and we should be able to see that coming up right there. I know it's in my PowerPoint. And then you could also email our friend Hannah Bullard, who is our director of sales here, and HBULLARD@tallo.com. Hannah would be able to follow up and talk to you about how to get connected with the mentoring program here, not just the book, but the entire program. Scott, on behalf of Tallo and all of us here, we want to say thank you and best of luck with the future books and programs. Thanks so much.
Hey, the pleasure is mine. What an honor to be a partner with Tallo. Thank you so much, Mike. Thanks for the spotlight today.
It's a pleasure. Till next time.